All right, so we're going to be taking a deep dive into the story of Matthew Perry's death.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Chandler from Friends.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where the initial shock
Mm-hmm.
just keeps getting deeper the more you learn about it.
Yeah.
At first, it seemed like a tragic accident,
Right.
drowning in his hot tub.
Yeah.
But then the toxicology report
Mm-hmm.
revealed a ketamine overdose.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, this case wasn't just about a celebrity passing,
Yeah.
but about something much bigger.
It really makes you question, like, the assumptions we make about people, especially in the public eye. You know, here we had this comedian, beloved for his quick wit and his humor,
Right.
and behind the scenes, he was grappling with something far darker.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And the investigation into his death uncovered this sprawling ketamine trafficking ring
Yeah.
that has led to some pretty high-profile arrests.
Yes. The case really shines a light on the often hidden world of illegal drug distribution and how it can touch even the most unexpected corners of society.
Yeah, and we've got a stack of sources to unpack here.
Oh, wow.
Articles about the investigation, court documents, even excerpts from Perry's own memoir,
Oh.
which is incredibly raw and honest about his struggles with addiction.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to piece together how this comedic icon became entangled in such a dark and dangerous world.
Absolutely. And as we dig deeper, we'll be exploring the motivations and circumstances of the key players involved.
Okay, so let's start with them. The investigation led authorities to three central figures.
Right.
We have Dr. Mark Chavez,
Okay.
a San Diego physician who ended up confessing to distributing ketamine.
Uh-huh.
Then there's Jasveen Sangha, the so-called Ketamine Queen,
Okay.
who was running a pretty sophisticated trafficking operation, supplying high-profile clients, allegedly, including Perry.
And what's fascinating about Sangha is how she cultivated this image of wealth and exclusivity.
Right.
You know, private jets, lavish parties.
Yeah.
It all speaks to the allure and seductive nature of the drug trade.
Yeah.
Especially for those seeking escape or a sense of belonging.
It's almost like something out of a movie, right? But it really highlights the dark side of that allure, how it can prey on people's vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And then we have Dr. Salvador Plasencia,
Okay.
a well-respected physician from Santa Monica, who was accused of falsifying medical records to cover up the illegal sale of ketamine.
See, that's the part that really gets me, the betrayal of trust.
Yeah.
We're talking about a doctor, someone who's supposed to heal,
Right.
allegedly using his position to fuel this illegal operation.
It's a stark reminder that these networks often operate in the shadows,
Right.
exploiting the very systems meant to protect us.
Yeah.
And it raises serious questions about oversight and accountability within the healthcare system.
It's mind-blowing.
Ugh.
Okay, so we've got these three figures from seemingly different worlds. A doctor who confessed, a so-called queen pin, and another doctor caught in the crosshairs. How did they all end up connected in this ketamine trafficking ring?
Well, let's start by unpacking Sangha's operation.
Okay.
Remember those lavish parties and the private jets?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about indulging in a luxurious lifestyle.
Right.
It was a calculated strategy to draw people in to create a sense of exclusivity and desirability. It's a classic tactic used by those in the drug trade to create an allure that masks the underlying darkness.
So she wasn't just selling ketamine.
Right.
She was selling a lifestyle, an escape. And for someone like Matthew Perry, who was battling addiction
Yeah.
and seeking solace, that could have been incredibly tempting.
Precisely. And it's important to understand the drug itself. Ketamine does have legitimate medical uses.
Okay.
It can be a powerful anesthetic, and in recent years, it's been used to treat severe depression.
I remember reading about its use in therapy.
Yeah,
But you're saying it's highly susceptible to abuse.
absolutely. And that's where the danger lies.
Okay.
Ketamine's dissociative effects can be alluring for those seeking to numb pain, escape trauma, or simply chase a fleeting high. But the risks are significant.
Right.
Chronic abuse can lead to serious bladder and kidney problems, memory impairment, and even psychosis.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So you've got this drug that can be both beneficial and incredibly dangerous, and then you've got someone like Sangha allegedly exploiting its allure to build a network of wealthy and vulnerable clients.
And this is where the manipulation comes in. We know from court documents and Chavez's own testimony that Sangha was incredibly skilled at identifying and exploiting people's weaknesses.
Right.
She would use charm, intimidation, even threats to get what she wanted.
So she wasn't just a supplier. She
Right.
was a predator.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the doctors in this case.
Right. Let's talk about Dr. Plasencia.
Okay.
He was known for his innovative treatments,
Okay.
particularly in pain management. He had a reputation for being a skilled and compassionate physician.
But the allegations against him suggest a completely different story. Falsifying medical records?
Right.
Prescribing ketamine illegally? It seems like a complete betrayal of everything he stood for as a doctor.
It's a chilling example of how the pursuit of profit, or perhaps something even darker, can corrupt even the most respected professions.
Yeah.
And it echoes some of the patterns we've seen in the opioid crisis, where doctors overprescribing painkillers have fueled addiction and devastating consequences.
Wow, that's a really disturbing parallel.
Yeah.
So we've got Sangha allegedly building this empire by exploiting the allure of ketamine and manipulating people's weaknesses. And then we have doctors like Plasencia allegedly enabling her operation.
It really makes you question how these systems meant to protect us can be so easily manipulated.
Right.
And it highlights the need for greater awareness and oversight to prevent these tragedies from happening.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
And then there's Dr. Chavez, who actually pleaded guilty
Right.
and cooperated with authorities.
Yeah.
He expressed remorse, talked about the pressures that led him down this path.
Yes. Chavez's case adds another layer of complexity to this story. On the one hand, you have his cooperation, which was instrumental in exposing the inner workings of Sangha's operation. He provided detailed accounts of how she would pressure doctors, prey on their vulnerabilities, even resort to threats to ensure their compliance.
So even though he was involved, his testimony helped bring down this whole network. It makes you wonder about the pressures he faced. What could drive a doctor to get involved in something like this?
Well, according to court documents and Chavez's own statements, it seems like a combination of factors contributed to his downfall. There were financial incentives, of course, but also a sense of being trapped, of being in over his head.
Okay.
He described Sangha as incredibly manipulative, someone who knew how to exploit people's weaknesses and use them to her advantage.
It's a reminder that even those we perceive as successful and in control can be vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about the role of enabling in these situations.
Right.
It's not just the suppliers. It's also the individuals and systems that turn a blind eye that allow these networks to thrive.
Exactly. And this case really highlights the systemic issues that can contribute to these tragedies.
Right.
We need to look beyond individual blame and consider the broader context.
Okay.
For example, the lack of adequate addiction treatment and mental health resources can create a vacuum that these illicit networks are all too eager to fill.
It's like a cycle, right? The lack of resources creates vulnerability, which makes people more susceptible to exploitation, which then perpetuates the cycle.
That's a really insightful observation, and it underscores the need for a more comprehensive approach to addressing this issue.
Okay.
We need to focus on prevention, early intervention, and providing support for those who are struggling.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Matthew Perry's legacy. He wasn't just a funny guy on TV.
Right.
He was a real person who battled addiction for years and used his platform to advocate for recovery and mental health awareness.
Yes. His memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, provides a raw and honest look at his journey. It's a powerful reminder that addiction doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone regardless of their wealth, fame, or success.
There's a passage in his book that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about the feeling of being trapped in a dark room, unable to find the light switch.
Wow.
It's such a vivid description of the isolation and despair that can accompany addiction.
And yet, despite those dark moments, he also found periods of sobriety and used his experiences to help others.
Right.
He was incredibly open about his struggles, which helped to reduce the stigma surrounding addiction and mental health issues.
He even opened a sober living home, Perry House, to provide support for people in early recovery. It shows how committed he was to using his platform for good.
His story is a powerful testament to the possibility of recovery. But it also underscores the challenges and complexities of the journey. It's a lifelong process, and relapse is often part of that process.
It's heartbreaking to think that despite all his efforts, he ultimately succumbed to this disease. But his legacy lives on in the people he inspired and the work he did to raise awareness.
Absolutely. And his story highlights the urgent need for more accessible and effective treatment options. It's not just about willpower.
Mm-hmm.
It's about providing people with the resources and support they need to navigate this incredibly challenging journey.
Now, we can't talk about this case without addressing the legal outcomes.
Right.
Jasveen Sangha, despite maintaining her innocence,
Yeah.
was ultimately convicted on multiple counts of drug trafficking and conspiracy.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like a pretty high-profile trial.
It was. The courtroom drama was intense.
Yeah.
You had Sangha vehemently denying her involvement,
Oh.
claiming she was being scapegoated, while Plasencia decided to cooperate, hoping for a lighter sentence.
What about Dr. Chavez? How did his cooperation factor into the sentencing?
Well, Chavez's testimony was crucial in securing convictions against Sangha and Plasencia.
Okay.
His willingness to take responsibility for his actions and provide details about the inner workings of the operation earned him a reduced sentence.
So cooperation can make a difference,
Right.
but it doesn't erase the harm caused.
Yeah.
It raises a lot of questions about accountability and the role of the justice system in addressing these complex issues.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that these legal outcomes are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
The larger societal conversation about addiction, mental health, and the systems that enable these tragedies needs to continue.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
This case goes far beyond the courtroom. It's a wake-up call for all of us to examine the systems and structures that contribute to these tragedies. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
A tragic death, a complex investigation, and a web of interconnected players. It's easy to get lost in the details, but I think the most important question we need to ask now is, what can we learn from all of this? What can we do to prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And I think the Matthew Perry case offers some valuable insights.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for a multifaceted approach
Okay.
that addresses the underlying societal issues contributing to addiction and the illicit drug trade.
So where do we even begin? It feels like such a massive problem,
It can definitely feel overwhelming, but I think it's helpful to break it down into different levels of action.
Okay.
On a systemic level, we need to advocate for better policies and increased funding for addiction treatment and mental health services. We need to push for stricter regulations on controlled substances. Right.
And hold those accountable who exploit vulnerable individuals for profit.
That makes sense. But what about on a more personal level? What can individuals do to make a difference in their own communities?
One of the most powerful things we can do is challenge the stigma surrounding addiction. It's often shrouded in shame and judgment,
Right.
which prevents people from seeking help.
Yeah.
We need to create a culture of compassion and understanding, where people feel safe to talk about their struggles and access the support they need.
So it's about having those difficult conversations, educating ourselves, and supporting those in recovery.
Exactly. And remember, recovery is possible.
Yeah.
Matthew Perry's story is a testament to that.
Right.
He struggled for years, but he also experienced periods of sobriety and used his platform to help others.
His story reminds us that addiction is not a sign of weakness, and recovery is not a linear path. It's a journey with ups and downs, and setbacks are a part of the process.
Absolutely. And everyone's journey is unique.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to treatment and recovery. We need to support a variety of approaches and make sure that resources are accessible to all who need them.
It's clear that this is a complex issue with no easy answers. But the Matthew Perry case has brought it to the forefront of public consciousness. That's a crucial first step.
I agree. It sparked important conversations about addiction, mental health, and the systems that often fail those who need them most.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will inspire more people to get involved in advocating for change and supporting those in need.
This deep dive started with a celebrity tragedy, but it's ultimately a story about the human condition, about the challenges we face as individuals and as a society. It's a reminder that behind the headlines and the court cases are real people whose lives have been deeply affected by these issues.
And their stories deserve to be heard. We can't let Matthew Perry's death be in vain. We need to use this tragedy as a catalyst for change, to create a world where addiction is treated with compassion and understanding, and where everyone has access to the support they need to find their path to recovery.
Well said. And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy one, but hopefully it sparked some important reflections and inspired us all to do what we can to make a difference in this ongoing conversation.